let's see what Prageru has to say about what do we do about the homeless.
What do we do about the homeless? This is one of the most vexing public policy problems we face. If you live in a big city, especially on the West Coast, you literally face it every day. And every day it seems to get worse. Why? Let's start with a couple facts. First, the word itself is misleading. Homelessness is not primarily a housing problem, it's a human problem.
Wait, what does that even mean? Okay, they'll probably explain, but no, it is a housing problem because uh, the cost of renting or owning a house gets more and more expensive, and wages don't increase as the cost of living increases. It becomes harder and harder to afford living in a house, so more and more people will become homeless. Uh, you have a large number of people who actually work and are still homeless because it's so hard to afford renting or owning a house. You know, when the cost of rent, when you need to make like 3 times your income to rent a house, or pay like 300, $400,000 for a house, it becomes nearly impossible when you're making like 7.25, $9 or $10 an hour.
The primary drivers of homelessness are drug addiction and mental illness. According to data from UCLA's California Policy Lab, approximately 3/4 of people living in cars, tents, and on the streets suffer from serious mental illness, drug addiction, or both.
So an easy solution to that is to um, increase funding towards counseling for people with mental illness and drug addiction, because one of the big reasons for a lot of people with mental illness on the streets is they shut down a lot of hospitals that were there to help treat mental illness back in the past, and all they did was just throw those people onto the streets. Now, if we want to cut or reduce the number of homeless people on the streets, well, let's start funding programs that will help treat people with mental illness and drug addiction. And one of the biggest ways of helping people with drug addiction is to legalize drugs, and instead of throwing people in jail for drugs, you give them counseling. We can do what Portugal did 10 to 15 years ago. Uh, they decriminalized drugs. I consider effectively legalizing drugs, but instead of throwing people in jail for that, they give them counseling if the drug use, if they, kind of spiral out on the drug use, they will be given counseling, and it's not stigmatized by society for using drugs. So people are not afraid of going to the doctor or the hospital or something when something actually needs to be done about it.
Second, despite these conditions, the homeless actually make rational decisions about where they want to live. Not surprisingly, they move to the most permissive environment they can find.
Oh, that's surprising. Homeless people will move to a place where it's easier for them to get the resources they need to survive. Yeah, that's what everybody will do, because people like to be able to get the resources to survive.
Make your city attractive for the homeless, and they'll beat a path to your doorway. The Venice Boulevard underpass on the border of Los Angeles and Culver City brings home this point. It's one of thousands of concrete structures in Los Angeles County, but there's a curious detail. The Los Angeles side is full of tents, and the Culver City side is empty. Why? Because the two cities have different public policies. Los Angeles has effectively decriminalized public camping and drug consumption, while Culver City enforces the law.
But that doesn't mean that Culver City doesn't have homelessness. They just arrest people for being homeless. So criminalizing homelessness doesn't stop anything. It just puts people in jail for no reason.
This pattern, that the homeless go where the policy environment is the most permissive, can be seen up and down the West Coast. In San Francisco County, it's estimated that 30% of the homeless migrated there after becoming homeless somewhere else. In the city of Seattle, that number is 51%. The San Francisco Chronicle estimates that hundreds of homeless individuals move to the Bay Area each year because of the perception that it is a sanctuary for people who are unwilling to participate in programs designed to get them off and keep them off a life in the streets.
No, it's just that a lot of these programs keep getting defunded more and more, so it's harder to actually get off the streets when about 90% of homeless people don't want to be homeless. If you talk to homeless people, yeah, all they do is talk about how they would like to get in a house, but it's hard because once you're homeless, you're basically stuck between a rock and a hard place. It's hard to get money, it's hard to get into a house, it's hard to get work because nobody's going to hire a homeless person. And if with all the stigmatizations of being homeless, it just makes it even harder.
At first glance, this would seem to make no sense. Why would an individual with no shelter or stable source of income move to one of the most expensive cities in the country? But in the world of the homeless, it makes perfect sense. That's because they operate under a different set of incentives than the average citizen.
Well, no, it's just that parts of California doesn't criminalize being homeless compared to other parts of the United States. And also, it's a warm place to be. When you don't have shelter, it is preferable to be in an area that is, warm year round, so you don't have to worry about, dying in the wintertime.
In a research survey of homeless migrants in Seattle, 15% said they came to access homeless services, 10% came for legal marijuana, and 16% were transients who were traveling or visiting when they decided to set up camp. But this dramatically understates the biggest draw of all, the de facto legalization of street camping, drug consumption, and property crime.
Property crime is not legalized, but camping on the street and drug use should not be illegal. Both of them are part of people's freedom. If you don't have a house, where are you supposed to sleep and, live if it's not on the street? They don't allow people to go camp in the woods. But hey, let's say you don't want to give people, no strings attached housing, which has been shown to reduce homelessness. A housing first policy, which is where you give homeless people houses to live in, and then you deal with, drug use issues, mental health issues, or other kind of health issues that may prevent these people from getting stable jobs. Because, once you have a house to live in, it's easier to deal with all the other issues you may need to deal with. Drugs is a choice of, it's a freedom thing. Everybody should be allowed to do drugs. You got alcohol's legal, and nobody is like, hey, we should punish people for using alcohol if they're homeless.
As former Seattle Public Safety Advisor Scott Lindsay has shown, the city is now home to a large population of homeless, prolific offenders. People who commit property crimes to feed their addictions, but are rarely held accountable for those crimes by the criminal justice system. So, is ever-increasing homelessness our inevitable future? If our goal...
Well, yeah, it is our future. If, wages don't increase, the cost of housing doesn't increase, the funding of mental health services and various other social services doesn't increase, Yeah, because every person, unless you're making like $500,000 a year, or maybe two to three thousand, 2 to 3 5 shoot 200 to 500,000 dollars a year. Um, if you're not making that, you're basically one foot away from being homeless.
Is to make life as attractive as possible for the homeless? The answer is yes. If our goal is to actually help the homeless, the answer is no. Houston Mayor Sylvester Turner is a Democrat, but his approach to homelessness is a world apart from his counterparts in Los Angeles, San Francisco, and Seattle. It is simply not acceptable for people to live on the streets. It is not good for them, and it is not good for the city, Turner has said.
Oh wow, wow. Like, how long did it take you to figure out that it's not good for people to live on the streets and be homeless?
Houston's policy is a perfect example of what Turner calls a tough love approach. The city has built housing for the chronically homeless, formed a coalition of nonprofit partners, and lobbied the state government for more mental health and addiction services. At the same time, Turner has enforced a strict ban on public camping and promoted a citywide campaign to discourage citizens from giving money to panhandlers.
Uh, that's gross. At least the preventing people from giving money from panhandlers. I mean, well, you can discourage. You technically can't ban it because it's freedom of speech to give money to panhandlers, and it's freedom of speech for people to be able to ask for money. I mean, it's no different than somebody standing on a street corner saying anything, even whatever it is, being like, the sky is blue. Can you discourage somebody from having a sign like that? And if somebody has a sign that says anything helps, and then somebody else says, oh, I want to toss a coin to this person, how could you make that illegal without creating an extremely fascist state? You would have to like have cops on every single street corner looking at if somebody is giving money to somebody else. And if it is illegal to give money to somebody else, how do we have any kind of transactional business going on?
The results are as instructive as they are stunning. Over the past 8 years, Houston has reduced its homeless population by 54%, while it has skyrocketed in West Coast cities. Different policies, different results. Where a Seattle politician opposes hosing down feces-covered sidewalks because hoses are racist,
Nobody. Wow, that is. Nobody has ever said hoses were racist. And yeah, they do clean their streets in California.
Houston fights in the courts for the right to clean up encampments. Where California progressives push for more drug injection sites and have decriminalized thefts under $950, Houston.
Okay, safe injection sites is good for people to go to so that they can use the drugs and be able to be safe from a possible overdose. I mean, it's really, honestly, no real different from a bar. I mean, at a bar you don't have like, a nurse helping you or anything like that. But if you want to help reduce drug overdose, these injection sites are highly useful.
Imposes consequences not only for theft, but for aggressive panhandling, window washing, and other street obstructions. As this Texas city has demonstrated, local leaders in cities of any size can meaningfully reduce homelessness through a strategy that mixes compassion with common sense enforcement. If cities stop allowing public encampments and open drug consumption and start prosecuting property crimes
have always been prosecuted. I find it funny how these people pretend that, homeless people or other certain groups of people are allowed to commit whatever property crime that they want when homeless people are, in pretty much every part of the world, are arrested if they, like, damage windows, break tables, or if they're sleeping in the wrong area or doing something else, yeah, they get arrested for it. It's not like they're um, it's not like the cops look at them and be like, "Oh, you're homeless, well, I can't do anything whatsoever." For the most part, homeless people are targeted more so than any other demographic.
They will have much more success redirecting the homeless away from a life of self-destruction and toward a life of hope through mental health treatment, drug rehab, and job training. That's what we all want, isn't it? So why don't we do it? I'm Christopher Rufo, Senior Fellow at the Manhattan